Welcome to Quillbilly Garage. This is episode 2 of my series titled 1934 Ford Sedan Resurrection. Today we're going to look at the master cylinder conversion for the brakes. So this car would have had mechanical brakes from the factory, no hydraulic assist at all. Sometime in probably the late 50s or early 60s, this was converted over to hydraulic. The backing plates, wheel cylinders and things like that are later Ford, like say 39 to 48 Ford. Initially, I was just gonna rebuild what needed rebuilding and get it back on the road. I didn't know what was used for a master cylinder. I'd never looked at it before I got into this project, and even as I dug into it, I thought, well, that it worked then. I'll just figure out what this master cylinder is, and I will rebuild it or get a new one and go from there. But the deeper I got into it, there were more and more reasons to just start over on the master cylinder mount. Nothing wrong with the way the rest of it's set up. The wheel cylinders, backing plates, that all works. But the master cylinder mount, the way it connects to the brake pedal and the hydraulic lines are all, well, let's say sketchy. They worked then. They probably would have worked now if I'd rebuilt it, but I'll show you more and you'll see why. So I had already taken the master cylinder off a while back before I realized I was going to do a series on it, but I've got it laid out here. That is an extra set of pedals that I have that I just put up here for demonstration purposes. So the way the mechanical brakes worked, you'd press on the brake pedal, it would pull this lever forward. This would be connected to what was called a cross shaft, a shaft that went left to right on the car and had different arms on it connected to rods that went to each of the four wheels. So here's how the previous person converted this to hydraulic brakes. I basically got it laid out in the order that it was mounted to the car. So this master cylinder, near as I can tell, it's like a late 40s, early 50s Dodge or Chrysler master cylinder. So they had bolted it sideways just like that to the frame of the car, and they had made this piece. That's the push rod for the master cylinder. It connected to this shaft coming off of the brake pedal, and so when you push forward on the brake pedal, it would pull the rod forward and pull this into the master cylinder, and then there's the return spring that was hooked back to some hole on the frame. So the way they did this, again, they bolted it sideways through the frame of the car. Forgive me here, I'm doing this one-handed. I don't have a tripod for the camera. And then this little homemade piece, which looks like they just made it with whatever pieces they had laying around, which I understand. These holes would line up with the holes on the side of the master cylinder, like that. And then these two pieces of metal that are welded on are the guides for this shaft as it goes forward and backward. So again, I apologize. It's the best I could do here to show you how that worked. Interesting note on the brake pedal assembly. Since these were mechanical brakes, you did not have a little hydraulic brake light switch. You had this mechanical switch that as the pedal goes back, it would push in on that mechanical switch. The other thing that so like I say, I was originally going to go ahead and make the best of it, get a master cylinder like that. Maybe do something a little better with these guides. Maybe put a little piece of Teflon in there or something so it would slide better. And that probably would have worked. It worked for years. But the other thing I noticed while inspecting it is all of the brake lines were made out of copper. And that worked. I'm sure it made it a lot easier to bend the lines around and get them into the right place. But I couldn't live with that. It's not recommended. And so I decided, well, if I'm going to change all the lines, if I'm going to go to the trouble of making this master cylinder mount a little bit better, why don't I just see if there's something else I could do that would solve all the problems. Another problem with this master cylinder mount is there was no way to hook up the parking brake because the lever for the parking brake came out not centered. It didn't have to, because it too would have been connecting to that cross shaft and pulling on the mechanical brakes and then setting them. So here in a minute here, we'll get into the car and take a look and see how it looks under there. All right, I got the car up on the lift here. As we approach, you can see it's got this nice drop axle that was installed at one point. 32 to 36, that's the year spread that it'll fit. So going under the car here, I'll try to go slow so you can get your bearings. So here we are, the back of the transmission. There's the battery box, and you can see these bolts, and that is where the master cylinder bolted to the side of the frame. This is what the shaft connected to the brake pedal, and that's what would have hooked to the shaft that slid along those little spacers and pulled the plunger rod into the master cylinder. This here with the string on it, that would have been the factory parking brake. And again, like I say, it doesn't come out centered. So let me turn around here. If we were going to connect to the emergency brake line, you'd have an angle on it. And I don't know that that would have worked very well. So when they converted it to hydraulic brakes, again, those are backing plates off probably 39 to 42 Ford. I think after 42, they still worked until 48, but I think they had a little bit different look to them. Not sure on that. And the spindles, you're looking at a round back spindle. I think that is like from 1937 to 40 something. I can't remember the year range, but you had to switch to that so that the backing plates would mount. The factory 1934 spindles didn't bolt up to the hydraulic backing plates. They can be modified, but that's how whoever did this made the conversion, and it works. Also, while we're here, I will note that this has I think they call that a reverse eye spring, where the bolt hole's up here instead of down below it, and that's just another way to make the front of the car lower. Now let's take a look at how I'm going to mount a master cylinder now. I picked up this cool conversion mount that mounts to all factory bolt holes in the frame. It uses a 39 to 48 style master cylinder, and it's got this bell crank system for converting the forward pull from the pedal to a rod pushing into the master cylinder. So it's got this rod here that'll mount to the pedal assembly, and then it's got this clevis back here that'll mount to the bell crank. And I think that's a pretty slick deal. This tube in the middle, that is for centering your parking brake. So instead of having a lever coming off, a shaft like this or like this coming off of the parking brake handle, it'll have a cable that runs through that tube, and then that's how it gets centered on the car, and so it can pull properly on the crossover cable that goes from the left and right rear wheel. All right. I took a few minutes and reconfigured the old master cylinder conversion just to make sure I was giving a good explanation of how they had it set up. I think it's pretty ingenious how they did it. So again, that's just an extra set of pedals that I set up here to show how it worked. But this master cylinder, which I believe is out of a Plymouth Chrysler product, was mounted with these 3 bolts to the side of the frame, and they'd used lug nuts, or big nuts anyway, as spacers to keep the alignment front to back on the master cylinder rather than following the shape of the frame. The 2 lower mounting bolts held this piece of metal on with these little welded on tabs that provided a track for this pull rod that's connected here to the push rod that goes into the master cylinder. So you'd step on the brake pedal there, it would pull this rod, pull that flat pull rod, which would then pull the plunger into the master cylinder. So I've got the new master cylinder bracket installed in the frame. And here we are. Again, this is not a restoration. I cleaned some of the grease off that was in my way, but that's what keeps it from rusting, right? So this is all mounted up. I don't have the rod connecting the brake pedal to this assembly yet, but that rod comes through that hole, will attach to right here, and then when you pull on that plunger will go that way and actuate the master cylinder. That brake line that you see up there, right there, that is just the old copper tubing that they'd used with the old master cylinder assembly, and that will go away as we progress with the project. Another point of interest, you'll see there's a hole in the floorboard, and that was punched in there to access the filling of that old master cylinder. This master cylinder here, there's more room on top, so wouldn't need a hole in the floor to get to it. We are back topside now. I lowered the car down and I got in here and I fished the new pull rod through. You can see I've got it attached to the brake pedal assembly. I do not have it connected at the master cylinder end yet, and I also don't have the nuts and bolt tightened. I may have to pull it back apart and make some adjustments, but here we'll pull the brake pedal up. So this would be the normal position of it, and you can see pushing on the brake pedal will pull that rod, which will be attached to that assembly below. So time for me to go back under and hook that up. Here we are back under the car. it's a little cramped under here, but I'll try to explain what I'm doing. This is the pull rod that we just installed above. And this is the bolt that will come out and we'll connect this rod to that pull rod. I'm sorry, this lever to that pull rod. Before I assemble the two, I'm going to wipe just a little bit of grease in that insert, and then I'll connect it up to the lever. I have the pull rod all assembled now and attached to the lever that then pushes the plunger into the master cylinder. We saw before up top that I had the clevis from the other end of this rod hooked up to the pedal assembly. Pretty clean installation in a dirty old car, I think. So this concludes this episode of 1934 Ford Sedan Resurrection. This episode was the master cylinder conversion. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope that you enjoyed it, and we'll look for other episodes coming out as I make progress towards getting this car back on the road. Thanks for watching.